All right. I thought it would be fun to talk about this puzzle that I put together today, which I call Rickety Rooms. um, I guess I didn't put it together just today. I think on Monday or sort of like sometime last week, I did an initial version of it that didn't feel that great, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And then last night, I started throwing this version of it together because I had some ideas about how I could make it better, and finished it today. And I quite like it. I'm quite happy with what came out of it. Um, yeah, if you want to give this puzzle a go for yourself, it's got fairly complicated rules, but it's like a one-off type thing. It's not meant to be like a whole genre of puzzle. It's just like here's a one-time thing with some interesting rules that I think is fun to play with. If you want to give it a go, it's on my Twitter feed, whatever you call it, at SFT Rabbit. So yeah, try it there. So I started thinking about this because I guess I just saw lots of people talking about pen and paper puzzles in the Thinky Puzzle Discord, and Hempuli was making some like interesting, like more abstract kind of pen and paper puzzle type things, and that got me thinking about it as well. And the main thing I was thinking about is like what kind of pen and paper puzzle ideas could I come up with that felt more like, I guess, less abstract, more concrete, like there was something more tangible in the solution you were drawing out. Actually, the very first thing I started thinking about was an idea where this was like still fairly abstract, where like each cell would have a number in it, which is pretty common. And then that would effectively be like an oil spill, I was imagining it, where it would have to spill out that many squares of oil in. I didn't quite figure out what the rules were going to be, but the idea was going to spill out oil, and there was going to be a path left between the oil that a fish had to get through. I didn't quite figure out the rules. But after thinking about that for a while, I was kind of more attached to the idea of the making a path for the fish to go through, and I was thinking about another idea where what if it was like an adventure game map, or like a almost like a Zelda dungeon type map, and you have to put the walls in to make it so that the adventurer can do the objectives and get to the end of the puzzle. And that was getting all complicated. And then somehow I ended up thinking about this idea. I think I must have been thinking about what if I put stairs in that adventure map, and then it led me. The thinking about the stairs led me to think about this one, which ended up being much simpler and nicer. Although it's still a fairly complicated idea for a puzzle, but whatever. So yeah, I guess I'll jump to the spreadsheet where I actually started off doing this. Spreadsheets are very convenient for mocking up pen and paper puzzles. So yeah, my first thoughts were kind of the basics were the same as what I've ended up in my latest puzzle, but basically the idea would be that there was some stairs and you had to make a path, like a hallway coming from those stairs, and that hallway had to connect rooms together in a house, and each room had some furniture in it. And the basic idea was that some of the rooms would have beds in and some of the rooms would have sofas in, and that would determine whether it had to be connected to the downstairs corridor or the upstairs corridor. I just liked like when I started thinking about this idea and what those results would look like, I just kind of liked the physicality of the thing you end up drawing. Like if you imagined it actually being 3D, it has an interesting, it's got like two levels to it, even though it doesn't actually make sense because the upstairs and downstairs corridors never actually cross over each other like a normal house, or as in, or the rooms don't go above the hall or whatever. Everything's still flat. But yeah, just thinking about it as a 3D object kind of made it seem more interesting to me. And so I started messing around with puzzle ideas, and I think this is the first one I started throwing together. I also had already had the idea of that there would be windows on the outside of the house, and so the goal was to have a room. Each room has one item of furniture and a window, and then the hallway has to connect to those rooms appropriately. And what I ended up finding with that is that it wasn't constrained enough at all. I started putting this puzzle together. I can't quite remember what my intentions were with this puzzle. Oh yeah, so the first thing was going to be, well, these two bits of furniture can't be in the same room, so there's going to be a line there, and then you would realize that then that space has to be part of that room because of things. Oh, because this one's coming down this way, and you can't. Oh yeah, I already also had the idea of you can't have a door that goes into a that gets like if the door's going into a room and it gets blocked by furniture, it can't be there. So anyway, it ends up leading to like this can't be part of the hallway, so therefore that has to be a room together like that. And then when I got to this situation, I was thinking about the door placement rule. Like, so obviously after you've got all the rooms set up, where do the doorways go? And I was finding that they were just like, it was impossible to constrain where they go. And I was trying to avoid rules that were too so one of the rules I thought about is, what if like you could only ever have one door in a particular row or column? But it's just too like, why does the placement of a door in a column affect the placement of another in the same column if it's like in a completely different hallway? Like, why are those two things connected? So I wasn't a fan of that rule. So I came up with another rule that I also wasn't a fan of, but I was more of a fan of, which ended up being the door. Not only can the door not be blocked by furniture, but it also must not have any furniture in line of sight once you open it. So, like, let's say this room was like this. That meant you could have a door here, in that way, and the door there. There was a reason why there couldn't be a door there originally. I can't remember what it was. But you couldn't have a door here, here, or here because they look. Once you open that door, you'd see the bed, or once you open that door, you'd see the chair, so on. And that's actually why I added chairs in the first place. It was just I threw them in because I needed to constrain where doors could go, which didn't feel good at all. So yeah, and I came up with a puzzle that worked with that. I can't remember what the final one was. Which one was this? Oh, I can't remember now. Oh yeah, this is the one I put out with those rules. Or maybe it's changed a bit between there and down here. I went through a number of iterations. I basically I'd draw it out, I'd copy it to the right side, I'd solve it myself. Well, actually, often what happens, because I was trying to do the whole forward design thing, because it's so tempting to just to think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the shape was like this, and then try and design the puzzle to lead to that. But it actually ended up being way nicer to think about, okay, so from the start, what's the first deduction the player's going to make? And then what's the deduction after that? And still you end up with interesting structures. So it wasn't important to start off thinking about, wouldn't it be cool if the shape was like this? Cool shapes happened anyway. But yeah, so I would often start trying to design it without solving it myself. Just by I was still thinking about the deductions as I was going, but eventually I'd be like, I can't really think about the deductions because I haven't marked on what my solution is so far. So I copied it over to here, started solving it, and then started making changes on the solved one, and then would transfer that back to the clean copy afterwards. And then if I ever noticed a problem, I'd go down to the next row and do it again, and eventually ended up with this thing, which I did send to people, and people solved it, but it definitely felt not particularly clean. The rules were overly complicated. There were strange things like so I originally had this rule, the hallway must not have any open 2x2 areas, i.e. like you can't have a hallway that is all four of those spaces without putting a wall in it, because then it becomes a corridor, right? Like a one wide corridor to walk through. And that led to weird situations where the interior wall could be placed in different places, and it was ambiguous in some situations, and so that meant when designing the puzzle, I had to avoid ambiguous situations. And then in designing this puzzle, where at the very end, what happens? At the very end, these are parts of a corridor like this. And so is that, right? I'm not going to put all the walls in, but if I just throw a wall up there. So this is a corridor, and then there was it could come around this way, because at this point I allowed 2x2 areas as long as they had an interior wall. And there was going to be a door on the left. I'll put a dashed line in for that. And there's a door on the right. The problem being, sorry, another rule that's included somewhere in here. So it says must not have any dead ends. So you had to place a wall such that you didn't end up with a dead end. So that wall that I put there doesn't lead to a dead end. Every space of the hallway is used to get to a door. But if, for example, I took that out, I guess I could just do that there. So it's a bit fiddly doing stuff in a spreadsheet, but it works. If you put it there, you would end up with a dead end here, and these two facing each other. So sure, I've got that rule in, so that gets rid of that placement, but still this one would be valid, as well as the one I had before that was across there. Like these two are both valid. So then I ended up throwing in this extra rule at the end: 2 doors must not face each other across the hallway, specifically for this case. It's because I got all the way through this puzzle and ended up with this. I was like, oh no, how do I disambiguate it now? And I just threw that in, which is not nice at all, because it's not used anywhere else in solving the puzzle, or it's not intended to be. And throwing in an extra rule so late might mean that earlier on in the puzzle, there are now places you could use that rule to figure stuff out early, and yeah, it just messes everything up. But I was getting pretty exhausted with this because I spent ages working on it. Yeah, that was that version. And then I left it for a few days, had some feedback, and I'd spent a lot of time thinking about this 2x2 problem and the interior walls. And somebody early on had mentioned that maybe I should just get rid of the 2x2 rule and not allow 2x2 areas, which ended up being the right decision. Like, absolutely. It took away all of the ambiguity, and just made it so much easier to A, design the puzzles, and B, come up with rules that were clearer. Also, I was never happy with the chair thing. Like, they're just thrown in to make the door placement work. So that's still part of that. Then, yeah, last night I was thinking about it again, and thinking about the two things: the chairs, or I guess more importantly, the door placement. How to constrain the door placement in such a way that, like, I don't have to add extra rules to restrict them further, and also how to constrain the 2x2 problem, or how to change that. And one other thing that bothered me with this original puzzle was that I had one window per room. So there are 6 pieces of furniture, like bed or sofa, in this. So that's 6 rooms total, and there are 6 windows. And so I think that ended up over constraining the puzzle, because I had ways I intended you to figure out the answer to this puzzle, where the first thing would be like that there has to be a wall along this edge, and then you could figure out that had to connect to there somehow. Can't remember the details, but I realized afterwards that you could just look at the windows to figure out how everything should connect together, or at least once you've got one room connected to a window, the rest of them fall into place. And so I was having this struggle of, where do I place windows so that it's ambiguous? Like, so here it's intentional that there's this window that this sofa could connect to, or this window that this sofa could connect to. to make it so that it's not obvious immediately, right? Otherwise, that would just be the immediate deduction you could make. It's connected to this window, so therefore it goes like this. But as soon as you've got one, that forces all of the others. Like that one has to be connected to that window, that one has to be connected to that one to that one, and that just sort of ruins the puzzle entirely. So yeah, I wasn't happy with that either. So those are the three things I wanted to change: 2x2 regions, the need for chairs to constrain doors, and the window issue. Okay, so the way I ended up dealing with that, is this the final puzzle? This is the final puzzle. Okay. Spoilers is the answer, but I'm going to go through it in a minute anyway. So the way I ended up dealing with it is actually, so obviously dealing with the 2x2 corridor thing was actually the easiest thing to do. I just said you can't have 2x2 regions. But I liked that the corridors could like wind around each other like this. Otherwise, you end up almost constraining the possible spaces too much. If you couldn't have a 2x2 region like this of like the two different hallways, it would be overly restrictive. So it's only that you can't have a 2x2 region of the same hallway type. So if it's upstairs, you can't have a 2x2 region of upstairs, and if it's downstairs, you can't have a 2x2 region of downstairs hallway. Even with a wall in there, you cannot have a 2x2 region. So I got rid of that, and at first I was a bit concerned about getting rid of 2x2 regions, but it actually helped massively. The thing I was concerned about is that it removed possible shapes of the house. So if we go back up to this puzzle, this situation would not be possible with removing the 2x2 thing. And I quite like the idea that this is possible. It turned out to be not that important at all. There was nothing particularly interesting about this that, I guess, other than like a corridor, a hallway, like winding around itself, it wasn't that important. And it was also beneficial in that, so it'll come up in this puzzle, but like so there are situations where you could, in theory, put like a winding corridor. Let's say the corridor went like there. If you allowed 2x2 spaces, you could wind through, or you could wind through in like a different direction in some situations, or you could not wind through and have two separate corridors in there, and it led to a lot of possible ambiguity in those situations. So getting rid of the 2x2 areas was very good. Regarding the chairs, so as you'll see, the final puzzle has no chairs in it, which is nice. That's because I constrained doors with a different rule, and I was originally going to constrain them by saying you can't. I was going to go back to that idea of what if you just couldn't have two doors on the same row or column. I also considered what if you couldn't have two doors on the same row or column but only within a specific hallway. But that always felt a little bit weird. And then I realized that I already had this idea about like you can't have any dead ends. So every end of a hallway has to have a door. So then it just became, well, why don't I just make it so that that's the only place doors can be? They have to be at the ends of hallways. And that was also a great decision that made it much nicer. So as you'll see in the final solution here, all the doors are at the ends of hallways. And it just removes so many options, right? Like now none of that wall or that wall can have doors going to this room because they're not the end of the hallway. And it also plays nicely with, because now when you shape a room, you have to make sure that there is an end of a hallway near it, and that's a nice little interplay between those two rules, which I thought was fun. Yeah, and then the last thing was the windows. So the thing I didn't have as a rule, I'm pretty sure I didn't have as a rule in the original one. The hallway. Yeah, okay. So I said nothing about whether the hallway could have windows. So the change that I made in the new version is that hallways cannot have windows. And it actually makes the rules a bit easier to internalize, I think, because now rooms have to have all the furniture and windows, and hallways always have no furniture and no windows, which I think just makes it a little bit easier to think about. And this also caused an interesting interplay with the way you structure the hallways, because now you can't have a hallway that runs along a wall, an outside wall with windows on it, or even like you couldn't have a hallway that connects to that window. So now you have to structure all of your hallways to never touch the windows, which is quite nice and gives you another way of constraining your solution. So yeah, that's the things I solved. Oh, and I guess more on that point about the windows is that the interesting thing about that is it now became less about where the windows are and more about where they aren't, because now it became about the hallway can only go where the windows aren't. And exactly how many windows there are in a room doesn't matter anymore. It's not one per room. It's some of the rooms have loads of windows, and that's nice because at the very beginning of the puzzle, there is a lot of potential places that a piece of furniture could connect to, like because there's so many windows, it could go to many places. And also, it doesn't have that problem before, where once you get one room, it doesn't immediately tell you where the other rooms are going to connect to, because there's plenty of windows, so they could connect anywhere. And yeah, so then it becomes more about where they're not rather than where they are, which is quite nice. Anyway, I thought I would then go through what my intended solve path for this was. So let me jump into Photoshop where I've got the thing. I'm curious to know if the way people solve this is the way I intended to. I imagine there are other routes. I mean, there's always other routes. You can always brute force it or whatever. But there's one particular path that I was hoping people would go down. And from what I've seen, I think people did generally go down this route, but I'm not totally sure. So just a quick recap of the rules. The entire thing needs to be divided into hallways and rooms. Rooms have to be square or rectangular. That was a beautiful rectangle. Or like that would be fine. Each room must have exactly one piece of furniture. So there's going to be 5 rooms here. And it must have at least one window. The bedrooms are upstairs and the sofa rooms are downstairs. So then the hallway is going to be coming out of the stairs here, where downstairs is on this side of the stairs and upstairs on this side. And so this upstairs corridor is going to need to connect to these rooms. And this downstairs corridor is going to need to be connecting to these rooms. And the doors between the hallway and the rooms must be at the ends of the hallways. And all that stuff about no 2x2 regions and things like that. Okay, so intended solve path was, I quite liked the idea that the very initial, this kind of makes it a little bit difficult to get started on the puzzle, but the very initial deduction had to be around the global constraints that the stairs places on the entire puzzle, right? Because this has to connect to there and to those two, and that has to connect to those two, and those corridors can't ever cross each other. Nor can, like, let's say they did connect like this somehow. This is obviously very vague drawing, but let's say the downstairs corridors went like this. Upstairs can't go round here because now these two pieces of furniture can no longer connect to the outside wall where they get a window from. So this can't come around this way. So there's a few options for how you could divide up those paths, like very generally. One is to go like that and like that, what I just described. Then this can't get to the beds anymore. Another option is for this to go, so downstairs to go like this to these and then around to here, then upstairs to go like this and through this gap, which is feasible. It can get through there. The problem at that point is that these squares are necessarily occupied, well, those two squares are necessarily occupied by downstairs corridor. And so this one would have to get to this bedroom, but also that one. But if it's getting to this bedroom, and that's going to be connected to the wall, we're going to have problems getting to that other bedroom. right? Because there's no other gap through here to connect to that bedroom. So that's out of the picture. So then the final approach, which is the correct one, is that downstairs has to loop around this way and upstairs connects like this. And so that was meant to be the first deduction that you have to make, which puts, which obviously this is downstairs. I'm just going to draw the walls in rather than shading stuff. And because this is going this way, there's then a decision about like, does it go up and down? Well, it can't go up and down because that would be a 2x2 region. You could think maybe I could avoid a 2x region by going like this or whatever, but then you create this like internal space here that has no furniture in it, which is not allowed. So this, at the very beginning, has to go like this, into this space. I almost drew a wall there, but that's not necessarily true right now. All we know is that the hallway is going to here, and then down, at least somewhere along here. So then the question becomes, right, if this is coming down here by some amount, it can't be zigzagging, right? Because that would form a 2x2 region. So therefore it must be coming down one of these corridors. So it's either coming down this one or like this. If it were coming like this, it would leave this space as like an interior unused space. It would be a dead end in a corridor maybe, which is no good. So it has to be coming down like this, which, if you mark in those walls, leaves this space here that needs to belong to something. The only furniture that could create a room that includes these spaces is this sofa up here. So therefore that sofa goes with these spaces. So now we know that this sofa room is like only on this column, but how far does it go? Well, it has to have a window in it, so we have to bring it all the way down to that window. So this is the one wall of the house where there's only one window to allow for this deduction. And then there's the question of, well, does it end here? Well, if it ended here, this would end up being, like, there can't be a room along here because there's no furniture on that row. So this would end up being the end of a hallway, and so we'd have to have a door going into this room, but that would be blocked. So it can't do that. That has to go all the way to the top. Similarly, at the bottom, does this continue here or does it stop? Well, if it stops there, very similarly, there can't be furniture in there. This has to be hallway, therefore there'd have to be a door there, which is fine, but you can't have a hallway with a window in it, and so there's a window here. The hallway would have to come around like that, or like here or whatever. Either way, it would have to go through that space where there's a window, which it can't have in it. So that comes all the way down to the bottom. And we know this corridor is coming this way, right? If it's coming to this space, we also know it's separated from the upstairs hallway there, right? And then at this point, we can also see that this must, to get to both of these, this is going to have to come over this way, this corridor. I keep swapping between corridor and hallway. Same thing. This hallway would have to go across this way, because sure, it could connect to this room here, but it can't go to the other one underneath, because then this room wouldn't be able to connect to a window, so it's going over to get to this one. So we at least know that the upstairs is going to be separated like this. At this point, we know that this sofa, basically this window needs to belong to a room, and the only room it could now belong to is this sofa's room. So this is at least going to go to here. And if this is the case, where is the door for this room going to go? If this continues over, then we have a problem, because obviously this now no longer has an end of a hallway next to it, unless this hallway ended here, and like the door was here, but then we would never get to that room. So if that extends too far, then we can never have an end of hallway next to it. So we instead we end it here, where the end of hallway can be here, with the door going in that way. Ta-da! And because that is an end of hallway, that has to be blocked off. It's a three-sided piece of the hallway. And obviously this is hallway, and that's a furniture, so these are separated from each other. So we know the right-hand bound of this room, but we don't know the rest of it. Okay, so next, well, now we can return back to this room actually, because we also need a door going into here, and we know that none of these spaces are ends of hallways. In theory, this could be, but then what room would that space belong to? It couldn't, because the rooms have to be square or rectangular. So therefore, this must continue to the top. And it can't contain the window, so it stops there, and the door goes there. Then, so similar to the situation we had with this window over here, we now have a window over here that needs to belong to a room. And so it's going to have to belong to the room with that bed, right? Because that one can't form a room with that window. So that's at least going to extend over to there. We also know that this downstairs hallway is not going that way. It has no reason to, and if it did go that way, it would be blocking off the upstairs hallway's path to the bedrooms. So that's going to be like that. And it can't go there and have a dead end because the dead ends have to have doors in them. So that's not allowed. Okay. So then at this point, the intended approach here is meant to be thinking about, well, how does the upstairs corridor now get to these two rooms? And so the critical spaces for that are these here. Because they're either going to be hallway or they're going to be room. If they're going to be room, because we know the bounds of this, that ends there. So if they're going to be a room, they're going to have to be a room with this bed, right? In which case it would extend like this or something. In which case upstairs can no longer get to the other bedroom. So we know that this space is hallway. So we, at the very least, we know that, oh, well, I guess, I was going to say we know it goes this way, but technically it could go this way, right? But then we'd be leaving a weird space in the middle that doesn't belong to anything. So we know it goes this way. So actually here is where I made a mistake. So when I first put this on the Thinky Puzzle Discord, there were actually two solutions because I didn't realize that, well, so in that version, this window wasn't there. And I didn't realize that you could then actually continue this corridor along here to that space and form this room like that and this room like that. So some other people found that as a solution. So this window was thrown in just to prevent that. Although I quite like it because now if you do think about the way this corridor could go up here, you have to do this thing where you go, well, if it goes in here, where's the corridor going to end? And so there's this thought about, okay, does it, I guess it has to end against a wall and not have any windows in it, so it'd have to end here, but it can't because then this wouldn't be part of a room. So now there's this like idea that this corridor can't go this way anymore. Of course, there's the question of whether it goes partially that way, like does it maybe stick out just one or something? But if you do that, what you end up finding is that well, if you do that, you don't have a way into this bedroom anymore. You have a way into that one, but not into that one because this isn't an end of hallway, so that's not going to work. And similarly, if you continue, it's very similar. I guess you can now start extending that way, but then you're going to hit a window at the end and it doesn't work out. So then that leads you to think about, so what if this room then, what if this doesn't extend that direction? What if this room just extends out to here? What if it didn't extend that far out? What if it extends to there? Well, then this is all hallway and we'd end up with a 2x2 region, which we can't. And similarly, if we went like a shorter distance away from this bed, we'd still have that kind of problem in this space. So, how did that end up there? There we go, it's gone. So at that point, we decided this goes up to here, and therefore this is an end of corridor, and that goes into that space. However, this space still needs to be occupied. Hold on, what was the intended ordering I intended for this? Oh, I can't remember. Well, okay, so we know that the extent of this room doesn't go to here and then go up to those windows, right? Because if it did, we end up with a weird space here that isn't used for anything, or would form a 2x2 hallway. So therefore, this section is going to belong to this bedroom up here. And so now we know the extent of this bedroom going to the north, and we have this bit to figure out. So at this point, the intention is that you now go back to the downstairs hallway and think about, could it go this way? Or does it have to go that way or whatever? Because I feel like the most natural thing to do here is going to go, oh, well, that goes to there. And there's no window here, so this is perfect. We're going to have a door here. But then because of that, you end up thinking about, okay, so what does that cause? If you go that way and connect to there, which it has to, right? As soon as you start going that way, there's no wiggling around you're going to be doing here and going up to here, because this room, once you've gone that way, you've decided the shape of this room. So it has to end, the hallway has to end there. So if the hallway does end there, what does that mean about this? What it means is that this room has to, okay, I don't think I necessarily put this wall in at this point in my original deductions. But yeah, at this point you're trying to decide, where does this room go up to? And can it go all the way up to there? Well, no, because now there's no end of the hallway to lead into that room. Can I go to there? No, because then you end up with a weird, how do I use these spaces problem, and so on. So that way becomes immediately not an option. So we are not going that way. We are going north. And if we're going north, then this is downstairs hallway and that's upstairs hallway, so we're at least doing that. So now we need an end of hallway for the upstairs corridor that's going to lead to this room. And so there's a bunch of options. Well, I mean, they're all very similar. There's, do we go to the end of the row? It's similar to before, right? If once we start going this way, we've defined the boundary of that room, so it has to end like that. Therefore, how far does this corridor go? In fact, okay, we know we're going that way, so we can literally mark that in, and we know that room's going to be that size. It's just how far does this corridor go that direction, and we can mark that off as well. So the first thing that I'm hoping people try, which is similar to the other one, but it has a problem for a different reason, is that if you go all the way to the end, the bed's now in the way. So if you try to go that way, you can't put a door there because the bed is blocking it. So that's not allowed. If you were to go through spaces, it doesn't work because you end up leaving the space as a weird, what can I do with it space. Similarly happens with going too far into it. That happens. So you're required to make it exactly one. Why does my phone think I'm speaking to it? I'm not. Anyway, that might not have been audible, in which case I sound like I just went crazy for a second. Okay, so now we have this, and we know that this room goes to there. I don't know why I removed that. So that has to connect to that. In which case, how are these spaces connected together? I mean, at this point, it's fairly obvious to see how it all connects together. That goes to there, and there's a door there. And we have the solution. So yeah, I guess at the end there is a bit of like, it's sort of, can I go this way? And does it cause a contradiction? Yeah. So the last bit of it is a bit like that. But I guess I felt like the depth that you had to go to wasn't that deep, because as soon as you start going in one of the directions, it immediately fixes the shapes of the rooms, and it doesn't. The contradiction is like immediate. But then maybe that's not that obvious if you're doing it for the first time. So yeah, maybe it feels like the space is quite deep that you have to go into. But in both of those cases, where you had to like project the corridor out along this way, there was like one option which is go all the way to the wall. There was then the in-between options that were all similar because they left a space unmarked, and then there was the not extending option, and that was about it. It's just, I quite like that in each of the cases, while they have similarities, like, so the two cases I'm talking about is like extending this corridor out to here, extending this corridor out to here. They have similarities, but A, the reason you end up figuring out the shape is a different deduction for both of them, and B, they end up in different shapes, which I like this one doesn't extend out, but this one does extend out by one space, which I quite liked. So yeah, that's it. That's the puzzle solved. Well, I got rid of a door. Oops. I thought it was pretty neat. Yeah, it's not intended to be a general purpose, like expecting lots of people to make the same kind of puzzle. It's just a one-off. Wouldn't this be interesting? And I think I'm happy with it. It's the rules are complicated, and I can get why. I've definitely had a few people have some confusion with some of the rules. And yeah, the stairs are weirdly have a weird perspective, but I've labeled them, so that helps. I think the new rules are much easier to kind of internalize than the old rules, because the old rules had some weird just bits and bobs just thrown in, whereas this kind of makes sense in a way. Like, of course you don't have hallways that don't have doors at the end of them. Why would you have a dead end in a hallway? And it's actually really nice that that leads to a sufficiently constrained puzzle space. So I was really happy with that. I guess the complication is inherent to the fact that it's this weird thing where there's an upstairs corridor and a downstairs corridor, but that's like the main that's the main point of the puzzle. So I can't really avoid that. And like the other stuff is like the windows and the furniture are all necessary to be part of that. But yeah, I'm happy with that, and I quite like the way the puzzle came out. I think it was at least fun to design. I hope it was fun to solve. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything more to say. I'm probably not going to make another one. Although I did think about the idea of doing like a sequence of them where it like introduces the rules one at a time. So the first one would be a small house with only rooms and no hallways. The next house would be a bit bigger and it would have a hallway in it. And the next house would have a staircase and all that kind of stuff. And it would be almost more like a game in the sense that you have to get from one level to the next and each level would have slightly more complication to it. Maybe if I come back to it, that's what I'll do. But I'm happy with what I've got so far. What else to talk about? Oh, one thing I was quite happy with is like how I ended up presenting the whole thing, because the original version just looked like that spreadsheet where it was like the windows weren't that obvious around the outside, and it's a bit ugly. But I'm glad I put this like the wall around the outside and made the stairs look a little bit nicer at least. And I had some comments about the fact that it was weird that the perspective of things was different, because originally, yeah, the beds were seen from the side, and so I actually these sofas and those beds are edited versions of these emojis. So that was a bit fiddly. I had to like do some copy and pasting and flipping and then filling in spaces just to make them look better. I think I did a decent job of that though. Those beds look like beds from the top. And those sofas, when I had the sofas the same way round, because like here they're obviously like that way round, and I originally edited them and kept them that way round, they were weirdly ambiguous. But now that I've sort of rotated them 90 degrees, they look more like you are looking at them from top down. Because why would you be looking at a sofa from the front on its end? That would be weird. I do think in terms of like, because there was confusion around like which side is upstairs or downstairs of the stairs, which I ended up solving just by labeling it. At least that was meant to solve it. Which often is the nicest way to solve a problem like that. Just put the information on the puzzle. But I think maybe I should have rotated the entire puzzle by 90 degrees so that there's no, because like if you look at this picture of the stairs, you could be thinking of it as like you're looking at this, you're coming up to the stairs and looking at it, and so that's the top of the stairs and that's the bottom. Whereas the intention is that you view it as like you're looking top down at these stairs. So this is the top and this is the bottom, kind of consistent to the rest of the perspective. But because it's ambiguous, maybe rotating the whole thing 90 degrees so that the stairs were rotated would have helped with that. Because if the stairs were rotated, you wouldn't be looking at it as though you were just like coming up to the stairs and looking at them. That would no longer be a thing. So that probably would have helped, but I don't think it's a big deal. I was quite proud of putting the arrows on that correspond to the colours of the furniture. So downstairs arrow is blue because the sofas are blue. and the upstairs area is red because the beds are red. I thought that was a nice little detail. It helps you like visually go, well, I'm connecting red to red, I'm connecting blue to blue. Yeah, I don't know if I have any other thoughts. That's pretty much it. It was good fun to design. I don't do pen and paper puzzles very often at all. Like I've done some of the ideological enigmas, as in actually like solving them. I also don't design them very often at all. I've got like one other one that I have shown to people, but I haven't yet really put out there into the world. That'll happen one day. But yeah, that's that. Hopefully it was enjoyable, and yeah, thanks for listening / watching. Okay, bye.